But how do we reconcile this act of creating reasons with the knowledge that they are, in essence, constructs? How do we persist in writing meaning into our lives when we know that the ink we use is not drawn from some divine well of truth, but from the fragile reservoir of our own hope and imagination? To me, this is one of the greatest paradoxes of being human, that we must live as though our reasons are real, even when we know they are not. We must act with conviction in a world that offers no guarantees. And perhaps, in doing so, we stumble upon a truth that transcends reason itself. Let's think about what it means to fight against hopelessness. For many of us, hope is not a steady flame, but a flicker of fragile, wavering light that we must shield from the winds of despair. And yet, even at its weakest, hope is powerful. It is the thing that keeps us searching for meaning, even when meaning seems impossible to find. It is the thing that keeps us alive, even when life feels unbearable. But here's the question: is hope enough? Can it sustain us when the reasons we create no longer feel convincing, or do we need something more?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
I think about the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of our lives. Stories of redemption, of growth, of triumph over adversity. These stories are beautiful and they are necessary, but they are not the whole truth. Because for every person who finds meaning in their suffering, there is another who does not. For every story of triumph, there is a story of defeat. And if we are to be honest with ourselves, we must acknowledge this. We must acknowledge that not everyone who suffers will find peace, and not every tragedy will lead to growth. But does this make the act of searching for meaning any less valuable? I don't think so. Because even if the meaning we create is fleeting, even if it is fragile and imperfect, it is still ours. It is still an expression of our humanity, of our refusal to be broken by the chaos of life. And in that sense, the act of creating meaning is not just a response to suffering, it is a rebellion against it. It is a way of saying, I will not let this define me. I will not let this take away my ability to choose. But let's not pretend this rebellion is easy. It requires strength, courage, and a willingness to confront the darkest parts of ourselves. It requires us to face the fact that life is not fair, that bad things happen to good people, and that the universe does not owe us an explanation. And it requires us to keep going, even when the reasons we create feel like they are crumbling beneath us. So how do we keep going? How do we find the strength to create meaning in a world that often feels meaningless? I think the answer lies in connection. In the relationships we build with others, in the love we give and receive, and in the ways we support each other through the chaos of life. Because while the reasons we create for ourselves may be fragile, the bonds we share with others are real. They are tangible. They are the thing that keeps us anchored when everything else feels like it is slipping away. But let me ask you this: what happens when those bonds are tested? What happens when the people you rely on for support are unable to give it, or when the connections you've built are strained by the weight of your suffering? In those moments, it's easy to feel isolated, to believe that no one can truly understand what you're going through. And maybe that's true. Maybe no one can fully understand your pain. But does that mean you are alone? Or does it simply mean that the connections we share are not about understanding, but about presence? About being there for each other, even when we don't have the answers. I think about your wife sitting by your hospital bed, telling you that everything will be okay. Does she believe that? Or is she simply trying to offer you the hope that she herself is clinging to? And does it matter? Because in that moment, her presence is what matters. Her willingness to sit with you, to share in your uncertainty, to hold on to hope, even when it feels impossible, that is what makes the difference. That is what gives you the strength to keep writing. to keep creating reasons, even when the ink feels like it is running out. But here's the thing, the act of creating meaning is not just about surviving. It's about living. It's about finding the moments of beauty, joy, and connection that make life worth living, even in the face of pain. It's about recognizing that while the reasons we create may not be real in the objective sense, they are real to us. And that is enough. Let me tell you something. I've come to believe the meaning of life is not something we find at the end of a long search. It is not a treasure buried at the end of a map, waiting to be uncovered. It is something we create in every moment, with every choice we make, with every connection we build. It is not a destination, but a process. And it is a process that never ends. But let me ask you something even deeper. If the meaning of life is something we create, does that mean it is fleeting? Does that mean it disappears when we are gone, when the people who remember us are gone, when the world itself is gone? Or does it mean that meaning exists only in the present, in the moments we live and share? And if that is true, is that enough? Can we find peace in the knowledge that the meaning we create is temporary, that it is a flicker of light in the darkness, but a flicker that matters nonetheless? I don't have the answers to these questions, but I do know this: the act of creating meaning is what makes us human. It is what allows us to face the chaos of life with courage, to find beauty in the midst of pain, to build connections that transcend the randomness of the universe. And in that sense, the meaning we create is not just a response to life, it is life itself. So here you are, lying in a hospital bed, your body broken, your future uncertain. The reasons you once gave to your life may no longer make sense. The stories you once told yourself may no longer hold up. But that does not mean you are without hope. Because as long as you are alive, as long as you are breathing, you have the power to create new reasons, new stories, new meaning. And that power is something the chaos of life can never take away from you. But let me leave you with this: if the meaning of life is something we create, not something we find, what kind of meaning will you create? What kind of story will you write? And can you find the courage to write it, even when the ink runs dry? The stories we write, the meanings we create, they don't always start with clarity. Often they begin in the darkest moments, in the silence that follows devastation. You're lying there, searching for reasons to understand why the world turned on you, why what was once secure crumbled into nothing. You reach for answers, and when none come, the temptation is to let go of the pen entirely, to let the chaos win. But here's the truth: meaning doesn't emerge fully formed. It's messy, it's fragile. And sometimes it's born out of nothing more than sheer defiance, a refusal to let life's randomness steal the story you still have the power to tell. But what does that mean for you, lying there in the hospital bed, unsure of whether you will live or die? What story can you possibly write when the ink feels dry, when the pages feel torn? Let me tell you something. I've come to believe the act of creating meaning is not a passive one. It's not about waiting for the pieces to fall into place or hoping that clarity will arrive like some divine revelation. It's an act of rebellion, of courage, of taking the chaos and shaping it with your bare hands, even when it cuts you in the process. Think about this: if the world is indifferent, if there is no inherent justice, no cosmic scale balancing good and bad, then isn't the meaning we create even more profound? If there's no higher power dictating the purpose of our lives, then every choice we make, every reason we give to our suffering, is entirely ours. It belongs to no one else. And that makes it sacred. Not in the religious sense, but in the sense that it is uniquely human. It's ours, born out of our ability to think, to feel, to connect, to endure. But let's not pretend that creating meaning will erase the pain you feel. It won't. pain is stubborn. It refuses to be reasoned with. It lingers, gnaws, and demands to be felt. And that's okay. Pain is not the enemy of meaning. In fact, sometimes it's the soil where meaning grows. Think about the moments in your life that mattered most, the ones that shaped you, changed you, revealed something about who you are. How many of those moments were born out of ease? How many of them came without struggle, without loss? Meaning is often forged in the crucible of suffering, not because suffering is inherently meaningful, but because we are capable of turning even the worst moments into something that matters. But let me ask you something. When the pain is so overwhelming that it feels impossible to create meaning, what do you hold on to? When the suffering eclipses your ability to find reason, where do you turn? I think the answer lies not in the search for meaning itself, but in the connections we have with others. Because while the universe may be indifferent, people are not. While chaos may be inevitable, love is a choice. And it is in those choices, in the small, everyday acts of kindness, compassion, and presence that we find a reason to keep going. Think about your wife sitting by your side, holding your hand, telling you it's going to be okay. She doesn't know if it will be. But her presence is not about certainty, it's about care. It's about saying, even if the world is falling apart, I will stand with you in the wreckage. That kind of connection, that kind of love, is where meaning often begins. It's not grand or dramatic. It's small, quiet, and deeply human. And it's enough. But here's the thing about connection: it requires vulnerability. It requires us to let others see our pain, our fear, our uncertainty. And that's hard, isn't it? Especially in a world that often equates vulnerability with weakness. But let me tell you something: there is nothing weak about showing your wounds. There is nothing weak about saying, I'm hurting and I need help. In fact, it's one of the bravest things you can do. Because in doing so, you open the door for others to step in, to share in your pain, to remind you that you are not alone. But what happens when the people you lean on disappoint you? What happens when the connections you've built are not enough to carry the weight of your suffering? It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? That the people you trust might not always be able to hold you up. But here's the truth: they don't have to. Connection is not about someone else saving you. It's about walking alongside each other, even when the road is uncertain. It's about sharing the burden, not erasing it. And in that sharing, something remarkable happens. The weight doesn't disappear, but it becomes bearable. And what about those who don't have anyone to lean on? What about the people who face their suffering alone, without the comfort of connection? Are they doomed to a life without meaning? I don't think so. Because while connection is a powerful source of meaning, it is not the only one. There is also meaning to be found in the simple act of enduring, of continuing to exist in the face of life's chaos. There is meaning in the resilience it takes to wake up each day, to keep breathing, to keep moving forward, even when everything in you wants to give up. Think about the earthquake that brought you here. It didn't happen for a reason, not in the cosmic sense, not in the moral sense. But it did happen, and now you have a choice. You can let it define you, or you can define it. You can decide what this moment will mean, not by ignoring the pain, but by facing it head on. By saying, this is part of my story, and I will decide what it means. But let me ask you something even deeper: what happens to the meaning we create when we are gone? When our lives end, when our stories fade, when the people who remember us are no longer here, does the meaning disappear too? It's a haunting question, isn't it? Because it forces us to confront the impermanence of everything we create. But maybe that impermanence is not a flaw. Maybe it's a feature. Maybe the fact that meaning is temporary makes it all the more precious. After all, what is more valuable: a stone that lasts forever, or a flower that blooms brightly for only a moment? I think about the legacy we leave behind not in the sense of fame or recognition, but in the quiet, invisible ways we touch the lives of others. The kindness we show, the love we give, the connections we build, they ripple outward, often in ways we can't see. And while those ripples may not last forever, they matter. They matter to the people they touch, even if only for a moment. And in that sense, the meaning we create doesn't die with us. It carries on in the lives we've impacted, in the moments we've shared, in the ways we've chosen to respond to life's chaos. So here you are, lying in a hospital bed, facing the uncertainty of what comes next. The earthquake that brought you here didn't happen for a reason. But that doesn't mean your life is without reason. Because the meaning of your life is not something that can be given to you. It's something you create every day with every choice you make. And while the ink may feel like it's running out, while the pages may feel torn, the pen is still in your hand. And as long as it is, you have the power to write a story that matters. Let me leave you with this: if everything happens for a reason, and that reason is one you create, what kind of reason will you choose to give? What kind of story will you write, not just for yourself, but for the people whose lives you touch? And can you find the courage to keep writing, even when the world feels like it's falling apart? Because in the end, that's what it means to be human, to face the chaos of life with courage, to create meaning where there is none, to write stories that matter, even when the ink runs dry, and to remember that while the universe may not care, we do. And that is enough.